Hello, and welcome back to my cryptid book series. We are on book 2 today. Last time we made a book about Mothman. It was a great start for me. If you'd like to see that, go and check out the description. But you don't need to watch that to know what we're doing today. But my question is, what do you think I'm going to do for our next book? When I was looking for inspiration, I was trying to find something a little more obscure, with some more lore, but then I saw the Fresno Nightcrawler, and I just had to. Guys, I just had to. They're so silly and fun and goofy. Is this more lore than Mothman? It's actually less. It's less lore. We'll find that out. But I had to do them. I really did. They're so cute. And I'll do some more lore-based, intense stuff in the next two. I picked the Fresno Nightcrawler. Before I lore dump, we've got to actually make the book, just like last time. For this book, I wanted to dye the pages. I had that idea in the last video, and I thought it would add a little bit more depth. The goal was to kind of line up the themes of the dyed pages to the cryptid, and then that got thrown out the window when I decided to do the Fresno Nightcrawler. So it doesn't actually match up that well, but it's okay. It ends up looking okay, so don't worry. But I wanted to see what it would be like to dye paper with red wine. I know it wasn't going to be as deep. It's probably going to be more purpley, but I wanted to try it out. Lucky me, my mom has a ton of red wine, and she hated this bottle, so she let me use it to dye the rest of my paper. Perks of living with the rents after graduation, at the cost of my mental health. My parents are actually lovely and I'm very grateful I can live at home, but no one wants to live in their parents' basement, so... Overall, I think the dye job actually went pretty well. There's some fingerprints and some funky stuff that happened, but I actually don't mind it. I find it makes the paper look a lot more interesting, so overall, good success with wine dyeing my paper. Okay, it's time for our second step of our process, and that is carving. I struggled designing this one as I really wanted to make the creep factor stand out to fit in with the other book cover. These little guys are just not scary. They're just not. I used lots of others' art as inspo by this one artist, Tough Ghost on TeePublic, and this other one, Cinema Mind, on DeviantArt. These two had me inspired enough to make my final design, and this is what I landed with. I try to spend time outside while making art, as I don't get outside much, and we don't have much time with summer here. I live in the north, our summers are hot, so right, when I can, I want to be outside. But it doesn't make for the best recording setup. So I switch to inside after things start falling everywhere and everything starts falling apart. And it was a lot easier. This process took me a while, mostly because achieving the long grass look meant using lots of little lines, but I'm happy with the design overall, and I think it fits very well with my Mothman cover at the end. It is time for our third step. We are back outside this time, but this time with a decent setup. I did this one in late spring, so we hadn't gotten our fire table out, so it made the perfect spot for me to print, and the lighting was pretty good. I played around a lot with the printing process and ultimately realized that printing outside was not a good idea, because the ink dries way too fast. So another reason I should be doing these inside. You live, you learn, at least the lighting is good. After getting my prints done, I could not decide which print I wanted to use for my cover. Because of the paper dyed with wine being darker than the print doesn't stand out and kind of fades into the color, but while the white paper version does not look as good with the wine dyed papers. But the print has more contrast and the print itself is cleaner. This took me a while to choose. I landed on using the wine dyed print and I'm ultimately happy with my decision. As you'll see, the comics kind of play into the fading into the background a little bit, and it makes it feel a little bit more cohesive. Okay, step 4. Don't hate me. I can't find any footage of the binding the book. I am so sorry. I'm actually really upset because I wanted to redeem myself from the disaster was the binding of my last book. Here's what the final looks like. I'm very proud of this binding, and I don't fully remember what happened with the filming, but I do remember having to redo it many times, so maybe my storage got full or something. This diamond pattern I found on Pinterest, and then I modified it for my book size. I'm really sad I don't have footage of this, especially since I'm proud of the binding. I'm gonna try to do better next time. Sometimes I just get frustrated and I turn off the camera and then I forget I need to film. Alright, step 5. We are on the final step of the comic making. Well, we are on the final step, the comic making, which is also the longest step of this process, but it is the meat of the juice. That didn't make sense, but that's okay. Like the last book, the first 2 pages are going to be info pages, then 2 comics and a collage to finish. I did not add an extra page this time, like I did last time. I learned how to count. When researching, I found that there is very little information about the Fresno Nightcrawlers, and that's because you heard it here, folks. It's a hoax. Yeah, sorry to burst your bubble, but this sighting was fully made up, and that's why there are no more sightings in the area. There has been similar sightings all around in different places, but nothing concrete or exactly the same. They're all a little different. The first sighting was captured on CTV footage. That's where the cryptid came from, but after it continued, there was evidence and admission that it was faked. Before this was discovered, other theories were that the Fresno Nightcrawler could be a pair of frozen pants or a standing deer. If you're not from a cold area, frozen pants is this thing that people will do in the winter where they get a pair of pants all wet and then set them up to freeze solid outside, and it looks like the pants is standing on their own. Y'all, ever wonder why the Midwest has such a huge drinking culture? I think the fact that people will freeze pants to stay entertained in the winter shows you exactly why. I'm from Minnesota, I know.
Michael, don't leave me here! Michael, help me!
I also added a Nightcrawler with webbing on their legs because there's a few accounts from other areas that cite webbing, so I tried to do that. I thought it sounded cool. And that is the end of the info page. This one's a little less information-based because there just isn't much content to talk about, but overall, I think it worked out. Alright, we are on to our first comic. So, like the last one, I'm depicting the first comic as the first sighting. So something inspired me while I was making this, and I made this comic much more dynamic with less structured panels, and I'm actually really happy with it. I liked the idea of the dog barking, feeling like it's interrupting the person sleeping, and that's where the dog is set and the words come from. This sighting is that he woke up to his dog barking, he checked his CTV and saw these creatures. Then he went outside and they were gone, but there was footsteps in the snow. The next day the investigators came, meaning I combined the footsteps and the investigators just to show that they were actually looking at something. I'm using watercolor for this comic instead of gouache, and I hemmed and hawed about going over it brighter, but I ultimately chose to keep it dim. Like I said earlier, I think it makes for a nice theme for the rest of the book. I'd love to hear any thoughts about this because I am still torn color-wise. I also got brand new microns for this, so I had a lot of fun outlining with my thinnest one. Overall, I do enjoy how this one turned out. Again, the muted colors make me iffy, but I'd love to hear some feedback on them. Time for comic 2. I had trouble with this. I really couldn't think of many ideas other than playing off the creepiness of a standing deer, so I took a break from it. I took that break and I came back and I made this second idea where there's 2 people talking and one doesn't notice that there is a weird creature behind him. Once looking at both ideas, I realized that the second idea I had is very similar to the 9/11 tragedy comic I did for Mothman, so I decided to go with my first idea, and I also think it's the more original and interesting one based off of the info we have about these creatures. Another thing is that I think deer are creepy as shit. I'm not sure if it's because of the Skinwalker and Wendigo stories having weird deer things happening in them, some recent fictional stories, and also the original native stories. I think wasting disease is horrifying as well, which definitely adds to it. The idea that a deer would be the first victim of an old forest creature also pushes that. All that said, I think deer are creepy as shit, and if I saw a deer standing, I think I'd scream. I think also another part of finding that creepy is the fact that they freeze in place, and that's why they're hit by cars, which is, yes, a normal fight or flight type reaction, but it freaks me out. So, again, overall, I think deer are scary. This comic was not as dynamic as the first, even though I tried, and that's mostly from the setup I made, but I don't hate it, and I'm mostly happy with this comic. Yippee! It's collage time! It's my favorite part of the book. Maybe not my favorite, but I love collage. It feels like such a good way to wrap up a book. I printed out some pictures like I did before that had to do with the Nightcrawlers. I had a general idea of what I wanted to do, but once I actually laid it out, it did not go the way I planned, which can be expected. Page 1 didn't have much on it, but I ended up leaving it with a little less because of the YouTube-esque red arrow and circle I was trying to achieve, like a thumbnail. The second page, on the other hand, lots of trial and error, and honestly, I did not like it for the majority of working on it, but you'll see me just adding and adding and adding because I didn't know how to make it look better. Cool thing with collage is that often that's the perfect way to make things look good. So, there we go. I also found some wrapping paper I had saved from a friend that had lots of cryptids on it. I cut out one of the Nightcrawlers from that. I got the most wobbly little guys on here, but I love them. I do like how this one turned out, and it definitely feels like a good book end. That is the end of the book. This one was a little slower moving, but that's more due to life circumstances. I'm also an art teacher, so the school year was ending. The burnout is real, and that made things slower too. I'm hoping to get this out in early August and get started on the next big one before school starts again. This might be more like mid-August, late August, but it will be out before school starts again. Let me know your thoughts on this book, or even your thoughts on the Fresno Nightcrawler. I'd love to hear some feedback. Thank you so much if you watched this far. I really, really appreciate you, and I hope you enjoyed.